Okay, well, let's get started. Thank you all for attending. This is the first time we have done something like this. I think the idea for this came together a couple of years. We've kind of been tossing it around with Anne-Marie and a few others, because one of the challenges that I have heard people both from the faculty side and the student side say is, how do I find students from the Marianas that want to do research and want to work on a project, or how do I find an advisor who will let me work back in my home islands? And so this seemed like a not good opportunity to try to do a little matchmaking between potential grad students and potential advisors, and so people know what opportunities are out there. And it's also really exciting that there are so many faculty that either have done work in the Marianas or are currently doing work or are interested in doing more work in the future. So it's really exciting to be at a point where we have 13 panelists, and there's a bunch of others that I messaged that couldn't make it for one reason or another. So there's a lot of opportunities, I think, out there. So the way this will go is that we will start by having each of the prospective faculty members talk a little bit about their research in their graduate program. They should be able to, I'll need to kind of make you co-host so you can share. Actually, I will just allow all participants to share screen. And so you will be able to share your screen and give a little spiel about your organization. We have a lot of faculty members, so potentially if you can keep it to 3 minutes, ideally 4 minutes is kind of and then 5 if you absolutely need that time, but I will cut you off at 5. And for students, I would take note of any faculty members that or prospective students, any faculty members that you're like, oh, that's cool research, write their name down in their university. At the end, we'll have some breakout rooms and you can jump into a breakout room. And when you're in there, I would introduce yourself and ask some questions and tell them about that you might have for the faculty member, or tell them a little bit more about your own research and interests. It might also be, this is a good opportunity, even if it's not, you're like, oh, that's cool, but I'm also interested in this. As a faculty member, we have lots of contacts with other people. And so we can be like, oh, check out this person who's at this university. So we can kind of help you figure out who else might be out there that would be a good advisor. And so if you have questions too, feel free to use the chat either directly to the speaker or to the group. And I think with that, let me bring up my list. Are there any questions from anyone before we get started? All right. Sorry, I need to find my list of people who will be speaking in what order. Here we go. All right, so first, I'll be playing a presentation by Monica Eggerer, who can't make it here in person because she's in Germany and the time change is pretty horrific between Germany and here. So, but she did record a little presentation. So let me open that. Almost there. Here we go. One minute. Sorry, I forgot to do the sound, share sound. I've been doing this all week and I still forgot that. Here we go. Try to. This should work.
Hi, everyone. My name is Monica Egger, and I am a professor for urban productive ecosystems at the Technical University of Munich and here in Bavaria, Germany. So greetings to you all, and thank you, Haldra, for organizing this great event. So just to give a brief introduction to our research group here in Munich, we are really interested in urban gardens and urban farms that are designed around food, but also flower production. And so we have a lot of different projects in our group that are sitting at the nexus between biodiversity conservation, sustainable agriculture, and human well-being. So we're interested in how urban agriculture like community gardens, where most of our research take place, support biodiversity of pollinators, of plants, of birds, etc. But also we're really interested in learning about how they're managed. So how does soil management affect important soil functions like water holding capacity? And so these are just different topics that our research group is involved in. I am in the School of Life Sciences. And so there's a lot of different other research groups that are interested in restoration ecology or landscape and urban planning. And even though you may not have an urban ecology background, you may still be able to harness your own research interests or own research background to apply them in a city context. And so I know the Mariana Islands have also a lot of home gardens or small scale agricultural systems. And so we are interested in some of these practices that are happening in more urban environments and how they can combat some of our global problems like biodiversity loss or climate change. So the graduate research program here is mostly based on fellowships or positions. And although I don't have right now, open positions because we've just filled some in our group, I'd be more than happy to talk with potential interested candidates to apply for a fellowship supported by the German government that you may use to fund a research project, for example, in the urban garden sites that we work in Munich. So I'm sorry that I don't have fancy slides because I'm just getting done with a day of fieldwork in our urban garden sites in Munich. But please take a look at our website at www.upe-lab.de and you can learn more about the projects that we're doing here in Germany. And hopefully find some Europe and Mariana linkages to do in the future. So thanks a lot for your interest and hopefully hear from you soon. Thanks a lot.
So Monica worked on a research project on in the Marianas on the role of sali and other birds in dispersing the Doni sali, the chili pepper. And so that's her link in it. And she's been really fun to work with. All right, Malia Nafis is our next speaker. Malia, you should be able to share screen or just jump on and chat.
Hi, sorry, I'm having serious connection issues today, so hopefully this doesn't break up, but I'm with U.S. Geological Survey, and our lab work is primarily focused on brown tree snake control and the ecological effects of brown tree snakes. And specifically, a lot of what we're doing right now is looking into the behavioral ecology of species and how they interface with control tools or potentially native species to better inform the removal and move towards restoration of Mariana Island communities. And as a member of a federal agency, the mechanism through which we usually take on graduate students is to partner with a university. So I work mostly with the University of Guam and Colorado State University because based out of Fort Collins, Colorado. But we actually have a lot of flexibility in that we can take on partners with any university, and that is a nice aspect of our program. And so I think with us, we often don't have very specific needs when it comes to graduate programs, but when we find a student that seems like a good fit who's expressed interest in participating, we work around to see if we can get their research interests integrated into our program to answer the broader needs that we have. And yeah, so definitely reach out if you have interest in brown tree snakes and how they integrate with the Mariana Island community.
Thank you, Malia. Feel free if you want to add your contact information in the chat. We can do that. I think we're working on a Google Doc that will send out to all the students so that you can add your contact information for the students, and then we can contact you with a list of the contact information for all of the faculty as well. Thanks, Malia. All right, our next speaker is a video from Lizzie Wandrag, who is also in Europe and thus couldn't make it. Let me share screen. There we go.
Hi, I'm Dr. Lizzie Vondra, and I'm a lecturer in global change biology at the University of York in the UK. At York, I sit in the Department of Biology and the Leverhulme Centre for Anthropocene Biodiversity. The Leverhulme Centre is a new research institute that brings together researchers from across disciplines to tackle questions relating to how human activities have influenced biodiversity and how changing biodiversity is in turn affecting human populations worldwide. I'll just share my screen with you quickly. So at York, I sit within that research centre, but within my research group, we're particularly interested in plant community ecology. So what determines where plant species occur and how abundant they are, and how that then influences the composition of plant communities and so biodiversity. This is just a snapshot of my website, which you can find there. So I'm particularly interested in how species interactions influence where plant species occur and how abundant they are. And those interactions are quite wide ranging in terms of the systems that I study them in and the interactions that work focuses on. So that includes interactions between plant species, so competition and facilitation, how plant species compete with each other for limiting resources and what the effects of that are, but also interactions between plant species and other groups, including seed dispersers and soil microbes. And so one area that I work quite a lot on is on biological invasions. So how species interactions influence which plant species become invasive, the impacts that those species then have, and then also more broadly what biological invasions can tell us about plant community ecology in general. That's just one aspect of global change that I'm interested in, also changing environmental conditions and changing disturbance regimes, for example, wildfires. So that brings me to where I work. So one place that I work is Guam, and so my link to the Mariana Islands stems from doing a postdoc with Huldra Rogers a few years ago, focusing on this species interaction seed dispersal. So the loss of birds from Guam has meant that many species of tree have lost their dispersers. So what has changes or losses of that interaction meant for the community composition of forests on Guam? So I spent just over a year living in Guam and have visited several times since and hope to continue to visit once the situation allows. Aside from Guam, though, I also work in Australia, and particularly Australian grasslands and the Australian alpine zone, so a mountain range in the east side of Australia. So both those systems are quite vulnerable to things like changing climates and changing fire regimes in particular, as well as biological invasions. So looking at how those global change factors are affecting species interactions and what the consequences of that are. And having moved to the UK recently, also starting to work in UK moorlands. So in terms of what I'm looking for in a student, there's not a specific set of skills that I'm looking for, because often those are more related to opportunities people have had to develop those skills, and there are opportunities to develop those skills within my research group. So the work that I do and that my group does mainly revolves around field ecology, experimental ecology and data analysis. And so those are all skills that can be learnt and developed within my group. What is important is a real interest in some of the overarching themes that my group are involved in, and in the topic of whatever research project group members are involved in, and then a willingness to develop and learn any skills that are necessary. A degree of self-motivation is really important in terms of taking responsibility for your own education and research projects, as well as developing and learning those new skills. So self-motivation, I think, is just really important. I'll just touch on the situation in the UK before finishing. So in my group, there are opportunities for short-term research projects, internships, or to take on PhD students. The situation in the UK is a bit different though. PhDs are only 3 to 4 years, and their focus really is on those research projects. The consequence of that is that advisors generally don't have funding to give to students. Rather, students are have to go through a competitive scheme to win scholarships to be able to support at least PhDs anyway. For PhDs, those are advertised usually around once a year, depending on the university, on findaphd.com. There are country-specific scholarships available to people. The University of York website has pulled together different resources on that, which you can find here. They're not administered through York, they've just pulled together those resources. And York itself has its own university level and departmental scholarships that you can also explore. So if anybody's interested in working within my group, then please do feel free to get in touch to discuss opportunities and potential funding sources, with the caveat that they are very competitive and difficult to get. But also, if anybody just wants to find out about studying in the UK more generally, not within my group, but just more generally, or how to go about doing so, then please also feel free to get in touch. And that's those are my contact details there. Thank you.
Great. So that was Lizzie Wandrag. And our next speaker, I believe, is Ross Miller. Is that right, Ross? Yes, Ross, it's all you.
Okay, thanks, Aldra. Yeah, my name is Ross Miller. I'm a research entomologist at the University of Guam in the land-grant program. UOG is a land-grant, an 1862 land-grant university. So we compete with all the big schools like Berkeley and Ohio State and whatnot. Our ace in the hole is our location here in the Western Pacific. We're the only U.S. land-grant university in this part of the world. So we cover about 1/5 of the globe in our area of responsibility. And our charter, university charter, actually mandates us to work throughout Micronesia. It's just not a Guam-based, we're not just a Guam-based university. We're charged with carrying the land-grant mission basically from Majuro in the Marshalls to Palau, Commonwealth of Northern Marianas, Saipan, Tinian, Rota, and Federated States of Micronesia as well. I currently sit on 3 graduate programs here at the University of Guam. University of Guam offers up to a master's degree in sustainable agriculture, in environmental science, or in biology. And the programs overlap a bit, but basically the sustainable ag is applied agriculture. Environmental science has 3 thrusts: terrestrial ecology, geosciences, and environmental management. And then the biology program in the past has been primarily a marine ecology program. With the hiring of new faculty at the Marine Lab, we have also expanded into more molecular genetics. And there is a bit of organismal biology that goes on. My own projects deal with invasive species primarily. I work on invasive ants. I've done a lot of work on aphids. The big thrust right now is forest health management. We've got quite a bit of money from the U.S. Forest Service to develop forest health or forest conservation strategies throughout Micronesia, as well as Guam. And we backstop the state foresters in each of the island groups and put on workshops, conduct research as appropriate. And Huldra and I have done terrestrial ecology courses, both in the CNMI, and as soon as the COVID situation allows us, plan to go and do the same thing in Ponape. And this course serves the entire Micronesian area. I currently have 3 graduate students. One is working on honeybee diseases and pests. We've got a very nascent and very vigorous honeybee association going on now. Honeybees are not native to Guam. They came in about 1907, but they are the prime pollinators now, since birds and bats are pretty much history, or having a lot of problems, I guess I should say. My other graduate students are working, one is working on forest health management, although her project is probably going to be on the competition effects of honeybees on native pollinators. Now, my third graduate student is working on the effects of little fire ant on the local flora, the local fauna. It's a project that we've had going for many years. We're basically looking at little fire ant infested areas, comparing those with areas on Guam that are not yet infested. I think that's about it, but you can contact me via email. And I think Dr. King, Romina King, will be talking about the environmental science program in more detail. So thanks, Huldra, appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, Ross. I've worked with Ross for a long time, and it's been really fun. Let's see, our next speaker is Sarah Converse from University of Washington. You with us, Sarah? And actually it's USGS. So I actually don't see her with us right now. So yeah, if she has something to share, I can share that later. I think that then skips to me, if I'm reading this correctly. Yes, so let me share my screen. Okay, so I am Huldra Rogers from Iowa State University. And this beautiful photo is taken by Lainey Berry, who's in Hawaii, but it shows seed dispersal by the toto, seed dispersal of agao, this plant by the toto on Saipan. So my research program kind of generally looks at how vertebrates affect plant populations and communities through both mutualistic interactions like pollination and seed dispersal, and antagonistic interactions like predation and herbivory. And then I like to think about how we restore defaunated systems. So that's kind of how I explain it if I'm explaining it more broadly. But in the Mariana Islands, it's really thinking about what happens when you lose all of the birds from a system and most of the bats. And then you also have introduced vertebrates like pigs and deer. Kind of how does that change pollination and seed dispersal and food webs? That's the question that captured my interest just before I started grad school. And I've been led to me starting the Ecology of Bird Loss project, and kind of a whole career so far of research on this topic. And then, you know, I think I spent most of maybe the first 10 years of research looking at trying to understand just what was going to happen on Guam in the future, and just how bad things were without birds in the system. And more recently, we've been able to transition to thinking about restoration, and restoration, you know, both in Guam and also thinking about what we can do to improve management and conservation in the CNMI. And so it's fun to think, you know, we've been thinking more about rewilding Guam and what it would take to bring birds back and spread them around, and how that changes the how we do that in a way that affects the health of the forest or health of the ecosystem. So we spent a lot of time thinking about seed dispersal and how important seed dispersal is for plants through all of these different factors. And we're about to just switch over to understanding pollination as well. So this is showing you all of the native birds and mammals, and the red lines show who is dispersing each of these fruits. So fruits are here on the bottom for most of the common plant species in the Marianas. So we know kind of who eats what fruit, but we don't yet know who pollinates which plants for those same plant species, so the same tree species in the native limestone forest. So we're about to start a big project that looks at all of these different pollinators and identifies the plants that they are pollinating. And so for that, there will be 2 PhD students that I'll be looking for to start in August of 2022. One would be primarily field-based in terms of their research. There's a big pollination experiment that would be lots of hand pollinating and self-pollinating and just trying to understand the pollination mechanisms for many of these tree species. And then one that's primarily lab-based that's using metabarcoding, get pollen from insects and vertebrates, and you can essentially figure out what plants those animals are visiting. This would be through the Ecology and Evolutionary Biology program at Iowa State University. I currently have 3 grad students from the Marianas in my lab, and I think we form a pretty, definitely feels, I think we have a pretty good community of people there, and it's nice to have other students from the Marianas that you can interact with, I think, in the lab. And we have a fun group. I'm happy to answer any questions or chat more. And these are the bottoms here, a couple of our lab pictures, just to give you a sense. Anne-Marie here in the front. And Christiana Canada, you can see here, and Geraldine Calaor over here. So I'll stop share. And we can go to our next speaker, Rebecca Rendell from SUNY ESF.
Thank you, Haldra, and thank you everyone for attending this. So my name is Rebecca Rondell. I am a professor at SUNY ESF, which is the State University of New York, located in snowy Syracuse, New York. Me and my lab group study the evolution and conservation of land snails in Palau, but we've also done some work in FSM, Federated States of Micronesia. And my first field assistant in 2003 was just pictured in the last picture, Haldra's grad student, Anne-Marie Gowell. So I feel that I have a long-standing connection with the Western Pacific in a variety of ways. So the kinds of students I'm looking for are those that are interested in little understudied invertebrates that maybe nobody else cares about. Especially land snails. But if you come in with your own expertise, like I have a student who's an expert in Palau ants, and he worked with Alan Olson in Guam, excuse me, I have Guam in the brain, in Palau for a while. And so, he already has that expertise, and then I bring another part of it to his project. So I'm open to a diverse range of students. We do both field and lab-based science. So I have a molecular lab where we do phylogenetics analysis. We have microscopy, so all kinds of different sorts of microscopes and the capability to do imaging of very tiny invertebrates. But we also do field work, and that's where students from the Marianas have an advantage because you're all already out there, right? So for students that already have a master's, our university gives some course credit for the credits that you've already earned. And so you can sometimes do a little bit shorter PhD that way. And so I don't have standalone positions to offer this coming year, but for students that are well qualified and apply to our program, we do offer graduate assistantships, both at the master's level and the PhD level. So for masters, we can fund a student for 2 years, and for PhD, we can fund 3 to 4 years of that, depending on whether you come in with a master's or not. And that includes your medical insurance and dental and all of that stuff, as well as a tuition waiver. And Syracuse also has a pretty low cost of living. So often we have students that come, and for the first couple years they take courses, and then they focus more on their field research or whatnot. And so there are some opportunities to maybe not have to live in Syracuse for the entire time. Trying to think of other things I need to say here. So the questions I'm most interested in are why there's so many species. But a lot of this, at least in Palau and also in FSM, involves documenting those species and understanding how, what their conservation status is. So a lot of the work that we do is kind of pattern based. So looking at biodiversity patterns, geographical distributions of species and that sort of thing. And ultimately, we'd like to answer evolutionary questions, but I also have students that get a little bit more into ecology or a little bit more into conservation and so forth. So I'm happy to, if you have any questions, for you to just email me, and happy to talk to anyone.
Thank you, Rebecca. Our next speaker is Jose Aban from the University of Guam.
Yes, good morning, and probably good evening and early afternoon for most of you or some of you. My name is Jose Edgardo Aban, and I'm a relatively new faculty at the UOG, and joined just almost like over a year ago, or almost 2 years. And just a small background about myself. My research area, my specialization is in satellite environmental remote sensing. And before joining UOG, I was actually moving in and about in most of the areas in Southeast Asia, having worked with both non-government organizations, international organizations, and the private sectors. So I bring with me some experience on the applications of remote sensing from the private as well as from the government sectors. Anyway, here at University of Guam, um, um, there are particularly some areas that I'll be interested in to work on or work with students. My area of research is remote sensing, which is basically a tool. It's a tool, more of a tool, and because of this, remote sensing can be applied in various themes and topics. I heard a lot of environmental and ecological studies that are being conducted right now, and I think there can be some cross collaborations between our laboratories and our faculties. But I am particularly interested, this is my personal interest in terms of research topics. Since my work when I was doing my PhD was dealing with global climate, no, not really climate, but global change in general. And I'm particularly interested to have students or collaborators as well, and students who will go under my wings. And I would love to train them and give them the ABCs of remote sensing, how it's really done, and eventually guide them into specific topics of applications of remote sensing. I am particularly interested to disciple students in the area of global change analysis, land use cover change, like forestry applications, how forests are actually changing. I am also particularly interested in developing pre-processing algorithms. That means image processing related kind of work, novel image processing techniques. I'm also interested to have students who could actually work on my shell project, I mean my shell research, which was my PhD, which is the long-term phenological analysis of normalized difference vegetation indices. So I'd like that to be jump-started again because I've shelved that for some time now. So I'm particularly interested to have students who are interested in phenological change. So this is basically multi-temporal analysis of vegetation and vegetation changes. I'm also interested, quite a lot of interest here, on working with digital elevation models and how it can be used for, say, sea level rise modeling. And just recently, me and my colleague, Dr. Romina, who's going to speak in a while, we've been working on the use of LiDAR for forest inventory, as well as developing digital elevation models for stormwater modeling. I think that's it from my side, and I hope to have some collaborations with you in the future, as well as have some students who may align to my interests. Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Halder, for organizing this.
Thank you so much. It was really nice to meet you. Thanks for jumping on. It seems like there's a lot of, there's a lot of work to be done, I think, with and value to in improving our remote sensing abilities in the islands, and so many projects that the expertise would be really useful for. Thank you. And our next speaker is Dr. Romina King, also from University of Guam, from environmental studies, environmental science. Go ahead, Romina.
I just trying to share my screen and then I can get started.
Okay, fantastic.
Can you see it now?
Yep, I can. Looks great.
Okay. How do you press play? I'm usually a keynote person on this. I'm so sorry. Okay.
You can go to slideshow, or you can go to the bottom right. There's a little like
oh, there. I see it.
There you go. Slideshow, and then play from the start. There you
go. Got it. Thank you. Okay, so hi, I'm Romina King. I'm the chair of the environmental science program at the University of Guam. And our more information about the EV program can be found on the link below. But basically, our objectives are to address the most pressing environmental questions in the Marianas as well as Micronesia. And also we want to promote educational and service projects here in the Western Pacific. And we would like our graduates to have knowledge and skills so that they can be really good scientists and conduct their work with professional integrity. Okay, and then also too with the EV program, we have a lot of faculty that come from multiple disciplines. You've heard from Dr. Miller, and Dr. Miller is the bug guy, the entomologist, and so I'm an environmental geographer. We also have faculty that are economists, biologists, marine biologists, geologists, hydrogeologists, engineers. So we have a lot of faculty with various expertise in all things environment. And with that, a lot of our faculty come from different research institutes within the university. So that's really different from the academic program. The research institute would be the Water and Environmental Research Institute of the Western Pacific, the Marine Laboratory, and the Western Tropical Research Station. So WERI, the Water and Environmental Research Institute, is run by Dr. John Jensen. The Marine Laboratory is run by Dr. Lori Raimondo, and the Western Tropical Research Station is run by Dr. Ares. And the backbone of these institutions are not just the research faculty, but also the research assistants and students. And usually our research assistants are working under one of these institutes, but enrolled in the EV program or the biology or the SAFNIR program. Okay, so that also means that there's a lot of different pockets of funding available. So I know WERI receives a lot of money from USGS. As Dr. Miller was mentioning with his group, they get a lot of money from like USDA, and Marine Lab would get money from, I guess, EPSCoR, NOAA, a variety of areas. I don't actually sit in any of those research institutes. I sit in the Micronesia Area Research Center. And so I'm going to talk about some of the grants that I am running and programs that I'm running. So one grant I'm running is the Pacific Islands Climate Adaptation Science Center. It's out of USGS. And at UOG, the modeler approach we've sort of taken is to sort of recruit current natural resource managers that are looking to maybe get their master's degree and figure out a problem that their agency has to address, and sort of transform that into a set of applied science research questions like for their thesis. So our current graduate students kind of involved in this model is Patrick Keeler from Bureau of Statistics and Plans, Department of Agriculture, Maribel Canada from NOAA Fisheries, and Farron, I think he presented, and he is out of Nature Conservancy. The other big grant that I also deal with is NASA Space Grants. So NASA Space Grants, we look to fund either undergraduate or graduate students. For our graduate students, we have two right now, James and Jonelle. Jonelle will be mapping Guam's mangroves, and James is actually working on the project that Dr. Aban had mentioned with cumulative and secondary impacts of development on stormwater flow in Tuman. Okay, and so for me, I'm an environmental geographer, and I specialize in using GIS and remote sensing and unmanned aerial vehicles, basically to use those tools to augment natural resource management. I'm a big fan of mapping things, anything, any environmental features, and as a geographer, we're interested in how human activities interact with that environment in order to get a better understanding of that, so we can help natural resource managers sort of obtain their goals while balancing out the economic and social needs of the community. My top four projects that we're working on right now are fluid lensing. This is basically imaging shallow water coral reef ecosystems through the use of UAVs and machine learning. This is a partnership with NASA. I know this is terrestrial, I'm sorry. And then mapping coastal freshwater discharge from the Northern Guam Lens Aquifer. Again, this is a NASA project, and I'm pleased to partner with WERI about this. And then also understanding the spatial extent of Guam's mangroves and using remote sensing technologies to kind of create that baseline. And then finally, the cumulative and secondary impacts of development. Okay. And then that's it. That's all I have. Stop sharing.
Thank you, Romina.
Thank you. And thank you for having me.
This is wonderful. Very nice presentation. So we're gonna now move into, so that kind of was the section of, well, first ecology evolution, and then the environmental science and geography, and now we'll move into the social science and humanities. I'll start with Dara Wald at Iowa State University.
Hello, thanks Audra for having me. Hello everyone. It's been so great to hear all about the awesome work that's going around in a lot of places. It's going on in a lot of places. I just have a quick couple of slides to give you a little background. I had the good fortune to be able to spend some time in the Marianas working with Anne-Marie Gowell and Halter Rogers on a project looking at what are the drivers and barriers to public support for conservation action on Guam. And my background is broadly in what's called the human dimensions of wildlife, ecology, conservation. And in particular, I spent a lot of time thinking about the social dimensions of invasive species. So this was a really good opportunity for me, and I learned a ton, and I'm so thankful for that opportunity. And so this project will probably continue in some variation in the next couple of years or so. And so might be an opportunity for some great partnerships. So as I mentioned, I'm a human dimensions person. And what that basically means is that I think about what drives human behavior. Why do they do what they do? Why does it sometimes look irrational from the outside? And what are the causes and consequences of conflict, collaboration, cooperation, and behavior? How can we create more effective, more legitimate, more inclusive participatory processes? When you get a lot of people together, you have a lot of opinions. And so thinking about ways to build collaborative processes that include lots of different opinions successfully is really, really a challenge. And that's what I spent most of my career thinking about. I've been thinking about sort of the system. This is just an image that I keep coming back to about like all of the different possible things that could be involved in people making decisions to either work together or work to do some kind of action. And, you know, if you think about all these different factors, right, if we think about the different agencies involved, the different people involved, the different laws, the different hats that people wear, the different social interactions that they might have, or the social pressures that they might have from family, friends, and community, all of those things sort of surround the decisions that people make, either to trust each other, to work together, or not. And so a lot of my work is around this idea of like all these different things that have to come together to make people, to help people work successfully and effectively together. And so the other thing that I think a lot about, so that's like the big context for the work, but then I also think a lot about interpersonal interactions and relationships, and how people's values, their cultural beliefs, their perceptions, their attitudes influence their behavior. So those are the sort of broad brush look at what I do. I am at Iowa State University, and where Haldra is as well. And so I've been fortunate to work with graduate students in Haldra's lab and have students in my classes from Haldra's lab as well. And I should be looking for, I'll definitely be looking for either a PhD student or a postdoc to start in the fall or spring of next year. And so that would be someone who's got expertise or interest in social, behavioral, or economic sciences, and specifically wanting to look at the human dimensions of invasive species. And so my email address is there. I'm on Twitter, but I'm terrible at Twitter. So email is better as a way to reach me. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dara. It's been really fun for me to work with Dara. It's a whole different way of thinking, but so necessary for conservation to be able to look at it from social and natural science approaches. And it's been wonderful, and all of my students have loved her classes. So I think she'd be a great advisor. Our Tiara Naputi is our next speaker, who is moving from the mountains of Boulder to Irvine, California soon. And Tiara. And I'm not sure if it's Dr. Tiara. I was trying to use Dr. for everyone. So Dr. Tiara Naputi. Sorry if I didn't say that.
That's okay. Half a day, everyone. Can you see my screen? It's just, this is a.
Yep, I can see it.
Just making sure. Okay. So I'm representing a department that I haven't yet started in, but I will be soon. This is the Global and International Studies Department at the University of California, Irvine. I'll be starting there on July 1. And so I just wanted to share some of my current research to kind of talk about what's on my mind and what I'll be up against here in a few weeks. And hopefully some of you might have some interest and we can connect. I've been really excited to hear about what is going on from the other presenters. So I might have to leave my own breakout room and try to join some of you all. But I do work at the kind of intersection of humanities and qualitative approaches. I look at Native Pacific cultural studies. I use Indigenous studies and global studies. My training is actually in communication. So I'm really interested in kind of those human elements that you just heard about from Dr. Wald, but really thinking about the cultural role. As a Chamorro myself, it's really important to me to be able to go back to the Marianas and to continue working there and to use the university experience as well as some of the other ways of knowing that are kind of outside of the classroom and maybe even non-Western perspectives to help make sure that we address the current global challenges of our time, right? So one of my current projects, bringing all these different interdisciplines together, is to look at the US military buildup and its impacts in the region of the Marianas. This is a very boring map, I say in some ways, but the Mariana Islands training and testing issues that are happening and the other issues that are planned for the region are really something that are at the core of what I'm looking at in terms of how do we get Indigenous perspectives or cultural perspectives to get us also thinking about this important place and the impact that we know that military buildup and military activities can have on the environment and our land and lives. And so, you know, there's UOG has a lot of different resources and opportunities. There's a lot of different conversations going on, not just in the Mariana Islands, not just in Guahan, but also throughout the the region. And so thinking about the interconnections that some of my work is doing about the military buildup in Wuhan and how that relates to what people are dealing with in Okinawa or in other sites that have important environmental issues like the Yanbaru forest in northern Okinawa, and some of the other places that are seemingly disparate physically or otherwise, but really deeply connected through the military issues. And I also work on sovereignty issues, which means thinking about what the role of the political status of a place like Wuhan, or thinking about the Commonwealth status in the Marianas has, how that impacts the ability to work with different places and be able to advocate for different issues when it comes to the environment and culture. So in terms of future research, very soon, like I said, I'll be starting technically at UC Irvine, but I also have a fellowship to be in the Marianas for 1 year. So I hope to connect with some of you in person while I'm there. I'll be coming, if you're in Wuhan, I'll be there very soon. And I'll be working on this project that's on this slide. It's got a long title, but I'll be working on it for 1 year and then continuing that when I get to Irvine physically afterwards. So I'm looking at working on a project called, of course, my slides cover it up, Sovereignty and Climate Change in Wuhan, Creating Sustainable Futures. There will be some internship and research opportunities locally. When I get there, I'll be looking for some students, hopefully, to help me work on different elements of this project, working with community groups. Of course, there's also the UCI graduate program, which just started 2 years ago. This fall will be its second year. So it's a PhD program for students who are interested in quantitative, qualitative, multi-method, different ways of thinking about global engagement. So that's pretty open. While I'm not necessarily as skilled as some of these other esteemed presenters about the sciences and some of those kinds of things, we definitely need to have various interdisciplinary perspectives. So this program that I'll be doing for the next year, 2021 to 2022 in Wuhan, will be about thinking about the issues of political status in relation to climate issues and how the communities can develop these sustainable futures when it comes to climate issues, of course, and also the influence that the military buildup might have on any of those pieces when it comes to the role of the environment and the military and pollution and those kinds of things. That kind of relates to some of my other research. If you're interested in kind of looking up something that's a little bit more short and sweet, this is an op-ed that I wrote a while ago about the issues of COVID-19 and island spaces and climate change, and kind of bringing that all together with how does that work when it comes to thinking about the environment. We also need to think about the military. That's obviously on a lot of people's minds in the region, but what are those impacts and how do we navigate those in terms of culture and in terms of other ways of thinking. So yeah, so that's kind of what I'm working on and what I'll be doing when I hit the ground, so to speak. I also just wanted to say that that's part of my thinking of what I'll be bringing to the Global Studies program at Irvine is an oceanic perspective, because despite being located in Irvine, California, they didn't really have much going on about Oceania or the Pacific or the Marianas. And that's something I'm excited to bring to the campus there, but also to continue these connections since I've been working in the Marianas for over 10 years now. And so this is our website, my soon-to-be departmental website. I can put in the chat a link to the graduate program. The graduate program is a PhD program. It has 6 years of guaranteed full funding, which is not something I had when I was a graduate student. So I think that's a really exciting thing on the horizon. Again, it is a focus on multidisciplinary, multi-method perspective. So if you're more of a quantitative person or a qualitative person, whatever your background, these are some places that you could thrive to bring those together. And the website, oh, I did put it on the slide. Okay, good. The website is globalstudies.uci.edu. We're thinking about cultural dynamics. We're thinking about human perspectives on a global scale and a local scale, and kind of the confluence and the different ways that those things interact. So yeah, that's what I'm about. I'm really excited to connect with you. Like I said, I'll be there soon. So if you're in the region or in the area, specifically in Wuhan, I'm really looking forward to that, and hopefully being able to connect, to have some of these discussions about internship opportunities or other things about the program at UCI for PhD students. And there's my email address on the bottom there. So Situ Usmasi, I'm really, really excited to continue the conversations with you all. Put this in the chat. I think I did that right. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's wonderful. Congrats on the new position and on coming out here for a year. I think hopefully we'll get to meet in person sometime soon. And you'll get to, if there are prospective students who are interested, that's a good opportunity to also be able to meet in person and look for some opportunities here. And having a fully funded PhD program is amazing. So that's it's not many programs will guarantee you, or some programs will guarantee you funding, but not all. And it's a question you should ask every advisor and figure out how you're going to be supported. And that's a really nice perk of the UCI program. So thank you very much. Our next presentation is, one moment, it's a recorded presentation from Eleanor Caves. Let me make sure it's open and screen share. Okay.
Hello, my name is Eleanor Caves, and I am a brand new PI getting my lab started at the University of California, Santa Barbara in the Department of Ecology, Evolution, and Marine Biology. So animals use a huge diversity of signals to communicate. They might be trying to attract a mate, display their competitive ability, advertise that they're toxic, etc. In my lab, we focus on visual signals in particular, and we study various stages between signal production and response. So we ask questions about the form of visual signals, how passing through the environment affects a signal, what the sensory capabilities and perceptual processes of different species are like, and ultimately how all of that comes together to produce a perceptual experience, right? How the receiver of a signal actually perceives that signal and then decides to generate a behavioral response. Now, much of the work in our lab focuses on cleaner shrimp, like the one I've showed you in this black circle, and their client fish. So cleaner shrimp are like the dental hygienists of a coral reef. They live at a set location, which we call a cleaning station, and then fish, which we call clients, come to the station, pose in the substrate nearby, and then allow the cleaner to hop on and pick off ectoparasites and dead skin. Now, one thing that's really intriguing about these interactions is that across reef ecosystems, we see that half or more of visits by clients are by species of fish that can and regularly do eat crustaceans. But recorded instances of predation on cleaner shrimp are extremely rare. So this raises the question, why doesn't the client eat the cleaner? Well, some of our previous work has shown that visual signals exist which identify cleaners as beneficial partners rather than food, and clients as seeking cleaning rather than a meal. So in essence, there are visual signals that allow these two parties who might normally be predator-prey to recognize one another and decide to cooperate. Now, we have a number of active areas of research on cleaner-client interactions, including the sensory ecology of these interactions. So how do cleaners and clients perceive and recognize each other and decide to interact? How do the sensory capabilities of client fish relate to the signal form that cleaner shrimp have? We're interested in the evolution of these interactions. How do cleaning interactions arise in the first place, and how do they remain stable over time? And we're interested in the behavioral ecology of cleaning interactions. How do the broader social, ecological, and behavioral contexts affect the outcome of these interactions, right? How does variation in something like ectoparasite community or number of client species or number of cleaners present affect how these interactions play out? How long do individual cleaning stations persist, and how are new ones founded? And how do client fish find stations? How do they know when new ones arise? And how do individual cleaners and clients develop cleaning behaviors? How do they know what to do in these interactions? Now, recently we've branched out from cleaner shrimp to other cleaning systems, including this one here, which is a system in Uganda's Lake Victoria National Park, in which banded mongooses actually clean ectoparasites off of warthogs. And another active area of research in the lab is the sensory impacts of climate change. In particular, as surface waters warm, many species are moving deeper to find cooler waters. And if you've ever been scuba diving, you know that one effect of moving deeper is that many colors become imperceptible. Different wavelengths are absorbed by the water column. We're interested in learning how much species will shift in depth in response to warming, especially in coral reef habitats, and how these shifts in depth will affect species' ability to see color and thus use color signals. And in particular, we want to understand how disruptions to color signaling affect species' ability to find and evaluate mates. Let's say you recognize a member of your own species by using signals that are red or yellow in color, but you've shifted to a depth at which red and yellow are no longer visible. How will this interact and affect with mate choice? So that's a really quick overview of what's happening in my lab, which, like I said, is brand new. I'm actively recruiting students. So if you're interested, please check out my website and get in touch. I would love to hear from you. Thanks.
Wonderful. So Eleanor worked with me when she was an undergrad as an REU student and has just had a really amazing career to watch, and wants to, she gave a talk at Poets a couple of years ago that some of you may have seen here at University of Guam, and wants to come back out to the islands and do work on the reefs here when she's at USCSB. So check it out and let your friends in the Marine Lab, I think we probably have more of a terrestrial audience, but if you know folks that are more interested in Marine, make sure they know about those opportunities as well. And then finally, we have one more Marine speaker, Roxanne Beinert from University of Rhode Island. I apologize if I pronounced that incorrectly.
No, that was great. Thank you. Yes, hi everyone. I'm crashing your terrestrial party today. Here we go. I have some slides for you. How does that look? Okay. Good. So yes, I'm Roxanne Beinert. I'm assistant professor at University of Rhode Island's Graduate School of Oceanography. And I'm a microbiologist by training, but I study microbial symbioses with other organisms. And so one of the systems that my lab works on are hydrothermal vent snails that are found across the Western Pacific, including at vents in the Marianas region. Move this forward here. Here we go. So this group of snails are called Alvinaconcha, and they're foundation fauna at vents in the Western Pacific and Indian Oceans. So here you can see their distribution. There's 6 species in this group, and you can see that they're found, this couple species are found at vents in the Mariana Back Arc Basin hydrothermal vent system. So these are 6 species. There's some images of them here. And these are foundation fauna, so they're really important to the ecosystems that they are part of. But they also have been recently classified as endangered or vulnerable through the IUCN Red List because of the threats of deep sea mining that are coming in the near future in this area. And so I have a little video for you. So Alvinaconcha hesteri is one of the species that's found at vents in the Marianas region. Vents are basically deep sea hot springs. So they're springs at the bottom of the ocean where hot chemically modified fluid is coming out of the sea floor. And so we find these snails all around these hot springs. And I'll talk in a second about why we do that, but here's some images there. They have a really great sort of spiky shell. And so you can see that hot shimmering fluid, they're sort of sitting in a bath of that. And they're sitting in a bath of that because they actually are farming bacterial symbionts inside their tissues, and the bacteria are providing their food source. So these animals don't actually eat. They just sort of sit next to these hot vents and absorb the fluid, chemicals in the fluid, which feed their bacteria, and they feed on the bacteria essentially. So here's another image of Alvinaconcha clustered around a vent, and there's some venting fluid coming out at the top. And this image shows their cells, and there's the yellow in this picture are all bacteria that are living inside the cells of these animals. And so primarily in my lab, what we're interested in is trying to understand how these bacteria are playing a role in the ecology and evolution of these animals, how they impact where in the environment these organisms live, and how they sort of fit into this ecosystem. And so we do a variety of different things from physiology, biogeochemistry, and ecology. We use molecular methods, physiological experiments, measurements of chemistry in the environment, as well as use things like omics to look at population genetics and diversity. And so I'm at the Graduate School of Oceanography, which is located in Narragansett, Rhode Island. And so my lab is here. We have this beautiful campus right on the water. We have an oceanographic vessel as well. And we have a master's and a PhD program at the University of Rhode Island. So I currently do not have funding to take a graduate student into my lab, but we, all of our students are supported either through TA-ships, teaching assistantships, or through research fellowships or assistantships. And so I'd be glad to work with any student from the Marianas region to put together fellowships or to think through other ideas for funding
to come to the University of Rhode Island, and in particular to work on hydrothermal vent snails from this region. So I think that's it. And just this is my little snail collection that's showing at the end, the various snail figurines. There's my email, my Twitter, and my website. So please contact me. I'd be glad to hear from you. Thanks so much.
Thank you. That was wonderful. The videos that's amazing.
Yeah.
And there's definitely lots of snail love in this group.
Yeah,
so I wanted to just I think that completes all of the faculty, unless there's any faculty that jumped on and want to say something. So now's your chance, or you could jump in the chat and also put anything. And I'm going to remind all the students who are here, or prospective students, or if you're like even maybe kind of I could possibly be interested, sign up on the Google link that's in the chat. And Marie, maybe I can post that again so that you see it, so we can get this list of emails, and that way we can email you with information. A few notes. If you are a student and you're not aware, there is a program that you can write fellowships to get funding for grad school, at NSF Graduate Fellowship Program, that are